Our slogan is give good, empower better. Giving projects is really good and it's really important, but empowering the people who receive them to use them to improve their own lives and oftentimes lift themselves out of poverty is the crux of what GivePower is really all about.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Alchemie Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Davis. The Alchemie Podcast explores a happier and healthier future for all. Featuring conversations with thought leaders, scientists, and change makers, we'll explore topics at the intersection of individual wellness, social equity, and sustainability. Join us as we look to bridge the gap between personal, community, and planetary well-being. Let's dive in. Hi, everybody. I am beyond excited to have today with me Michele MaGee from GivePower. Michele is the president of the GivePower Foundation, a US-based nonprofit organization electrifying the world with clean energy to improve education, health, and economic opportunities for those who need them most. Since 2013, GivePower has deployed projects in 26 different countries, powering over 2,000 schools, building microgrids, and delivering access to clean water for over 800,000 people each day with its solar water farms. Previous to joining GivePower in 2019, Michele has held a number of C-level positions in privately held companies, senior leadership roles in publicly traded companies, and also serves on a number of boards. Companies she's worked at include Solar City, which was prior to the Tesla acquisition, which I'm sure you all have heard of, and GoodLeaf, which is now the largest financer of residential solar in the United States. Michele's passions include philanthropy, supporting women in achieving their full potential, and enjoying time with her family. I've gotten to know Michele over the past number of years, and it's been such a pleasure. So I'm beyond excited to have her here today in conversation with us. So hi, Michele. Welcome.
Hi, Dana. Oh, this is such a treat.
I know.
I've been looking forward to this. I always love when we get to hang out and chat. So,
yes, agreed.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I really am grateful.
The feeling is so mutual. And just a little insight to our listeners here. We did have a little snafu our first go around. So I'm hoping this time around that we don't have the same, issues with contractors behind us or something. So here we're going to give it a go. But as I'd like to start off all of my podcasts, I ask the people who are attending to tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words. And what I think is so beautiful about doing that is that you can actually understand what are some of the pivotal moments in people's lives, the things that shape them in their journey. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more about you and your background and how you've gotten to where you are today as the president of GivePower.
So I was raised in Northern California and as the eldest of three daughters. I'll linger on that for just a second because I had this amazing gift from my parents in a seed that was planted very early in my life. So parents out there, if you're listening, think about this for a bit. But my parents sort of raised us understanding that we were born with certain gifts that had a purpose in life. And so from the very beginning, I sort of had this idea that eventually I would find this thing that was going to be the reason that I was here. Now, life takes over and you do all of the normal things. I went to college, I graduated, I took a job. My very first job was in shopping center marketing, of all things. But in retrospect, looking at that first job, I got to learn 100 different businesses that had shops in the mall. And as a marketer, that gave me the chance to understand different customer types and marketing strategies and so on and so forth. So it was a great place to start my career. In the course of that experience, I got to know radio particularly. And I ended up leaving my position in shopping center marketing to go to work in radio. And I spent 13 years in that industry, coming up through sales and sales management, and then eventually managing stations for CBS in Sacramento. Over that same 13 years, I also owned two businesses. So I had a chain of all things tuxedo rental stores.
Oh my gosh.
I had 5 locations in my 20s. I know more about menswear than you could ever imagine.
That's a fun fact for sure that you could probably play at any of those, two truths and a lie. That's a great one.
There you go. Right. And then I started a magazine publishing company that supported radio stations, particularly in the country format during those years as well. And so then I found myself in 2005 managing those 2 radio stations. And I had this little baby advertiser on my stations that were spending gobs of money. And I remember going to our sales managers and saying, hey, I got to meet these guys, or, we've got a lot of invoices out there and so on. And I went to lunch with this wonderful man named Hayes Barnard. Hayes and I had a 3-hour lunch at FATS in Sacramento. And by the end of that 3-hour discussion, I had made the decision to leave my radio career and go start companies with Hayes. And the area where we really connected was on the purpose of the companies that we would start together. It was never to make money. It was to save the average family money on their everyday bills. And so we started a mortgage company first, Paramount Equity Mortgage, and because that's your biggest bill as a family. And we thought if we can save you money there, that would move the needle. And then we started an insurance company to save money on insurance. And then we started a solar company to save you money on your electric bills. And those companies did really well. Well, flash forward in 2009, during the mortgage meltdown, we were holding on by our fingernails, hoping that our little companies would survive. We made the decision to take our executives to Mali, Africa, to build a school.
Wow.
And the idea was the world was struggling, we were struggling, and we needed a more grateful perspective. And so we raised the funds from friends and family. We built that first school in Mali. And it was during that trek that we were sitting in the dark in this little village, and we started talking about that solar company we had started and how amazing it would be if we could come back and bring electricity to this village. Well, flash forward, that company got very, very successful. We were able to sell it to Solar City in 2013. Hayes and I, as part of that acquisition, moved to San Francisco and went to work for Solar City. And we took this concept of electrifying communities with us to Solar City. With Solar City support, we were able to power over 1,500 schools in the first 3 years of what is now GivePower. So that's a very long-winded story to say, from that little seed that was planted in me as a child about finding my purpose and the use for my gifts. I tell my team all the time that I am living my dream come true now, being able to use whatever skills I've developed over my lifetime to be able to go and serve others in the developing world by bringing electricity and solutions to their communities.
Honestly, so beautiful, Michelle. And I feel like you and I have talked a lot, but I had no idea you started off in radio. That's amazing. I that is just like such a, again, a really fun fact about you that I love so much. But to your point, it just shapes so much about your journey and being able to market to different customers and understanding advertisement. So it totally makes sense. And now you're here kind of bringing all of these worlds together with GivePower. So I think that's like a perfect segue. I've had the honor of participating in one of GivePower's treks, and this was recently in Kenya, and it was truly one of the most magnificent experiences I've ever had. And I don't use that word lightly. And frankly, I don't really even use that word magnificent, because there's really few things in your life that you feel deserve, I don't know, for me at least, deserve the word magnificent. And it was truly very life-changing, and being able to witness and feel and engage with the community was incredible. So I would love if you could just share a little bit more about what GivePower actually does, maybe some of its programs for our audience, just be helpful to kick us off.
Sure. So Dana, as you mentioned, we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. And over the course of those 10 years, we've had the opportunity to tackle a lot of the world's biggest problems. If you think about water scarcity, food scarcity, education, conservation, all of the biggies that our planet and humanity has to wrestle with, they all require electricity in their solutions. And so that gives GivePower the opportunity to work on a lot of diverse projects. We categorize the things that we power into 3 different programs. The first is our Trek program. To date, we've taken close to 900 people on 90 different treks, who go out and they live in a community over the course of the week, and they build a solar project. Typically, those are relatively small. They power a school or a food processing center, something like that, because they need to be completed in that 1 week. So at the close of the week, that group gets to flip the switch and see the impact that they're delivering in these communities. This year, for example, we'll take 280 people on those treks across 28 different visits. The second program we call Solar Impact Projects. Those are our larger solar projects. And so they can power everything from huge conservation parks, the infrared centers and the radios for the rangers and those sorts of things. They power whole communities. We just finished a hospital in the DRC.
Wow.
We've got food processing centers for cacao and acai in Colombia. We have I think we're up to 40 different projects in Nepal that span the gamut of water to food to education, so on and so forth. But those projects, I think we've got 193 now that we've completed in the Solar Impact Program that are kind of those larger microgrids. And then last but certainly not least is our solar water farm program. And so, for the first, up until 2018, we had really focused our energy on deploying microgrids and powering schools. And every time we went out to build one of those projects, we kept running into this issue around clean water.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, as great as it is to bring light to a little girl in her school, if she doesn't have clean water to drink, she's not in school. She's fetching water for her family, she's caring for sick loved ones, or she's sick herself. And so in 2018, we deployed our very first solar water farm. A solar water farm uses solar and battery power to desalinate salty water that comes either directly out of the ocean or out of a well inland. Our solar water farms today, as you mentioned, provide access to clean water for over 800,000 people every day across 14 different sites. And we're growing that program very rapidly. They're centralized mainly in Kenya. We have 2 systems in Haiti. We have another one in Colombia. And next year, we look forward to expanding that program into Tanzania. But I love all my babies. All 3 programs are really important.
Yeah.
And I'm just so very, very grateful for the donors that make all of that work possible.
You kind of touched on this a little bit about the location and geographies that you serve, but can you talk about where, in particular, you all specifically work? And maybe it's just a handful of good examples would be great.
Yeah, we're actually up to 27 countries now. We just added Zambia 2 weeks ago with the power for a large orphanage there. But the communities are those in the developing world that don't have the basic needs met by government support or other NGOs. Mm-hmm. And so we're oftentimes going into either peri-urban areas that are, what you might see surrounding large cities where there are slums and very difficult living conditions, or they're very rural communities that are just isolated from the things that you and I take for granted. And the beauty of solar is that we can deploy solutions off grid. We don't have to be connected to electric grids, and we can be really helpful in meeting some of those most basic needs.
Yeah. And I think going into the basic needs a little bit more, you and I, even prior to this, have talked a little bit about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is this, this concept in psychology where you have this 5-tier model of what a human needs in their life. And, it really starts with that physiological, and then it's safety, and it ultimately rises up to self-actualization. I can definitely not giving it justice. We could probably do a whole conversation specifically on Maslow's, but I think what's really interesting about this concept is that it's addressing exactly what you're talking about. Basic human needs need to be met before folks can start to elevate up in other things in their life they might desire.
So if you think about Maslow's hierarchy, the concept is that you have to meet your most basic needs before anything else matters. And that's sort of what we observed out in the field around this issue with water. And so what's awesome about GivePower's work is we actually have the ability to impact each of the 5 stages of Maslow's. We can help provide access to food and access to water to take care of that most basic physiological need. Then you move into security. And for us, that means putting roof over people's heads that have light so that they can function. And then you move into love and social connection. We get the chance to power community centers where people can congregate and build relationships with each other. Then you move into esteem. Esteem generally includes things like jobs and education. And we get to power those sorts of things. And then at the very top of the pyramid, if you're so lucky that you don't have to worry about all those other things, you get to focus on self-actualization, which is really personal growth. And so for us, that's digitally connecting people via the internet so that we can all share ideas and support each other's growth as human beings. So it's super cool to be able to overlay our projects within the hierarchy and see the connection in how we can help in all of those various points.
Yeah. And I think what's also so beautiful about this example is especially what we're all about here at Alchemie around personal, community, and planetary well-being. It really starts with the individual and our ability to take care of ourselves, right? And so to your point, if folks don't have access to basic human needs like clean drinking water, maybe there's droughts in the area, maybe there's just difficult access in general, you can't really even start to think about those other things about, your community or the well-being of everyone or even the planet for that matter. So I just think it's so incredible what you all are doing. And having had seen it myself, I highly recommend people look into your guys' work a bit further. Another thing that I remember from my experience on Trek, which was something I learned and is incredible about your organization, is that you really engage your community or the communities in which you work in the projects. And I know for someone who has worked a lot in environmental and social impact, I recognize and understand the deep importance of community engagement. So would you mind sharing a little bit more about, your guys' philosophy or how you work with your communities to ensure that those systems are actually what the community needs and that there's sustainable development along the way?
Yeah, I borrowed this from Michael Dell, but I think he just says it so beautifully. We have big ears. And what I mean by that is before we endeavor to build anything in a community, we go in and we ask questions and we try to listen to what the community tells us about what they actually need. Oftentimes you can, have all the best intentions of in the world, but you may end up building something that doesn't actually improve lives in the way that they really need it. Mm-hmm. So before we build projects, we go into the community with boots on the ground to talk with people. And we have a whole surveying kind of process that we go through to explore need. Once that initial groundwork is done, then it's a matter of working through both the official and the unofficial leaders in communities. And they are equally important. There are governors and there are counties and things like that we need to interact with, but there are also chiefs. And there are groups of women that oftentimes have a matriarchal kind of leadership structure within a community that we need to engage. And it's very, very important that we're respectful of their way of life and understand it before we come in and implement something that could be really different for them. Mm-hmm. And then after we've actually built the project, oftentimes we're either training people on how to maintain the system or we're actually hiring people and creating jobs within those communities to continue operating the projects. Our solar water farms, for example, are built to remain productive for over 20 years. And we continue to own and operate them for that entire 20-year span. So when we select a community to build one of those systems, we're making a very long-term commitment to providing jobs and training and incomes to people in operating those systems.
Yeah, I think that was what was so cool when I was in Kenya. We were working with and partnering with and talking to GivePower's staff who were Kenyan.
Yes.
And I loved that because there's so many organizations in the world, to your point, that may have that disconnect between intention and impact. And it's really important that we meld those two things together when we go, especially into different communities that we might not be originally from. And so, I just really appreciate your guys' thoughtfulness in that approach in your and in sustainable development in general.
Yeah. So, Dana, our slogan is give good, empower better. Mm-hmm. Giving projects is really good and it's really important, but empowering the people who receive them to use them to improve their own lives and oftentimes lift themselves out of poverty is the crux of what GivePower is really all about.
Yeah, love it so much. And I know for you, there's been a lot in your life that has shaped you outside of work to, be passionate about this stuff. And so a couple months ago, I know you and I were catching up, and I never knew that you were a mindfulness practitioner. You had a yoga practice. And can you share a little bit more about your personal well-being journey and how that has impacted your professional journey?
Yeah. I enrolled in my first yoga class when I was 17, which was, nearly 40 years ago. And because I needed an elective when I enrolled in college, it wasn't, I would like to say it was on a search for, a higher purpose and so on. It wasn't. It wasn't like
It served a purpose, which was your elective.
right. But I was hooked, Dana. And, I venture out into cycling or running or weightlifting or whatever, but yoga has been my staple for wellness, both internally and externally, for many, many, many years. And I'm just so grateful that I was introduced to it when I was very young and have had that as a tool to keep me grounded, to be able to stay centered in who I am, no matter what's happening in the world. Just incredibly grateful for the practice.
Amazing. Yeah, I love to hear that. It's always fun when you meet fellow yogis along the path, and you would, and maybe in a different context. It's always really fun. I'm jumping around a little bit, but I wanted to get back a little bit into some of the work that you would do with GivePower. And I know for myself, I have my own stories that were incredibly impactful. And I think storytelling is an incredibly important medium for us to help drive change in the world. And so I was wondering if you could share a personal story or memoir that you experienced out in the field in one shape or form with GivePower or in another, form that really shaped you in a meaningful way.
I think my favorite part of the job is watching the progress of people who just need a chance. We have 117 employees worldwide now, and about 80% of them are outside of the United States. And so 2 years ago, I was in Kenya, and I was there for the grand opening of one of our solar water farms. Typically, our big systems employ 6 people. And I met the team, as I always do. The most humble job within that group of people is our cleaner. And I met this young woman. I could not get her to engage. And I sort of came to the conclusion that her English might not be that great. But she had very, very short hair. She was very tall, but slumped. Her body language just said, she'd been through some things. A year later, I came back to celebrate the first anniversary of that site. The team was having a nice dinner for the staff, and I sat down at a table, and the site manager asked this young woman who was sitting next to me to give the blessing food. And she had these beautiful long braids, and she stood up. She gave out, Dana, one of the most eloquent prayers I had ever heard in my life. And her words were all about her community and being able to meet this basic need for water, and what a gift that was for our team to be able to do that. Just such a powerful, eloquent prayer. And she sat down. We ended up talking to the site manager and saying, "Who is that?" And she said, "Michelle, that's Marcella, our cleaner. She had been promoted into our salesperson for the whole site. And last month, we got to promote Marcella into site manager of her solar water farm." My takeaway from that, and I wish I had a picture that I could share, maybe we can do it after the key fact, is that there are so many people in the world that just need a chance. Mm-hmm. To show what they can bring to others in their communities. And Marcella is just one of many, many that GivePower has had the opportunity to engage in that way.
Oh, I love that story so much. And I think there are so many other folks that I'm really excited to bring onto this show and this podcast that have, I think, similar messages in and around giving people a chance. Elevating voices is so important. Elevating, people and opportunity is so important. And so thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Well, I know we're kind of running out of time here, so I wanted to wrap up a couple things before we finish up. And like I was saying, alchemy is really about this intersection between personal, community, and planetary well-being. And we're looking at a number of verticals and stories that help to share that same vision and build a community around it. So I was curious if you could share a little bit more around your perspective on how you see Maslow's hierarchy of needs and sustainable development really fitting into that broader narrative. And of course, if you want to call through or talk to GivePower in that, please, we'd love to hear that too.
Yeah. So we talked about the upward movement in Maslow's and how you have to fill your bottom needs before you can move up. But I think one of the things that those of us in the Western world who have the luxury of really focusing on the top tiers of the pyramid need to be cognizant of is that it is possible to go back down in the pyramid. And for those of us who have the ability to think about climate change thoughtfully and to be able to educate ourselves and the people around us about our planet's needs, we have a responsibility to do that. Or we could find ourselves right back at the bottom of the pyramid. You know, there are parts of the United States today that are really struggling with clean water. These problems are not limited to the developing world. And if we're not careful and we don't use our station in the Western world responsibly to care for our planet, things could shift. And so for me, it's all connected. You know, we need our planet to stay healthy in order for us to physically remain healthy. We need our society to stay healthy in order for us to remain in a positive place. You know, I visit parts of the world now where communities are fighting with each other over land because there's water in one area and not in the other. Yeah. And that social disconnection and the fight over basic resources is real. Mm-hmm. And it's starting to happen around our planet. And so it's important, in my opinion, that we see the interconnectedness of the health of our planet, of our society, and of us personally in staying in harmony with all of those things for all of our general good.
No, that was well said. So well said, Michelle. I think one of the stories too that I forget who said this, and was someone on track, which I thought was so on point, but water in general is a basic need that we don't even realize we have access to here in the States. You know, we can turn on our faucet and drink in many places straight out of the tap. In many places as well, we are using and going to the bathroom on potable water, which is mind-blowing to me now that I actually understand that, because, you know, when you're going to many other places, you know, you can't even just drink out of the tap. Granted, you're going to the bathroom on potable water, and that is just insane in my mind. But when I have these moments of looking for gratitude and looking for something to be grateful for, it always for me comes back to water. And I think it stems back to some of these experiences similar to what you had of, you know, we need water to survive. And the fact that we have access in plethora in many parts of the US is something every day we can easily be grateful for. So I think as we wrap this up, I always ask our speakers to share one, maybe two call to actions or takeaways that our community can take from this conversation. Anything that you think that they can do off of this call to actually help drive impact in their communities and in the planet. And we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to me is educating ourselves. You know, the discussion around climate change particularly was, is it real? All that sort of stuff. I feel like at this point, that's an IQ test. Like, yes, there are hurricanes, there are forest fires, there's drought. Like, it's kind of real, guys. We've gone up the 2% in degrees, or sorry, the 2 degrees that we were all trying to avoid at this point. So the is it real part is kind of in the past. This is the decade of how we're going to curb this super dangerous trend that we've put ourselves in. And so there are lots of things that we as individuals can each do that don't require us to make monumental changes in our life, but collectively can make a massive impact in the change that we need to see in the way we're treating our planet.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you choose to drive an EV or put solar on your roof or recycle your garbage or buy less clothing, whatever the laundry lists of things that we can each do, pick one. And when you've got that down, maybe pick another. You don't have to do all 10, do something. We all need to take responsibility at this point in time and make changes in our personal behavior that collectively can make the difference.
Yeah, it's like, don't let perfection be the enemy of good.
Amen. Yeah.
And in this moment in time, we need to put one foot in front of the other, take one moment at a time versus trying to accomplish everything in one moment. It can feel really overwhelming. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much, Michelle. I am beyond excited again to have you here and grateful for your voice and grateful for your leadership. And yeah, just wanted to say thanks and we hope to see you soon.
Oh, Dana, it's a pleasure. Always, always. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thanks for listening to the Alchemie Podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation today, you can find more about the speaker in our show notes below. In order to build a global community committed to well-being for all, we need your help. So please rate and subscribe to wherever you're listening from. Finally, we could not do this without the help of our amazing team. A huge thank you and shout out to Lindsay Todd, our producer. All right, y'all, have a lovely, lovely day.